Hello guys, welcome to this tutorial. Today we're going to learn about a concept in JavaScript known as a counter app. So we're going to see how we're going to combine HTML that is on display here, a CSS to style the page, and then JavaScript to make sure that when we are creating our page, it's going to have two buttons. When I click the increase button, I'll increase the counter, okay? Then I'll click the decrease, I'll decrease the counter. So to get us started right away, we're going to create a div. Okay, so I'm going to match it up with what I had already styled here, a div known as a counter container. So I'll have my counter container div here, counter container. Then inside the counter container, I want to have two buttons. So the first button is about decreasing. So I'll have a button that is going to say decrease. Okay, and then going to have a counter here. Okay, so we'll have a number in between the decrease and the increase buttons. So we'll use a span for that case and call it an initial value of 0. And then going to have another button here that is going to increase. So since I've set up this already from this VS code, I'm going to open it with the live server. So yes, we have our page here that has a decrease button, increase button, and a counter in between. So to make it easy, let me open or minimize this so I can view all these at the same time. I also minimize this, then pull it to this other side. Okay, and then try to resize them nicely. Can decrease this a little bit more, then increase back this. Okay, so I have my two buttons here. Decrease button, when I click it right now, it doesn't do anything. When I click the increase button, similarly doesn't do anything, and we have our 0 here. So to get us started, we must know how to connect these buttons and this is span to JavaScript. Okay, so we know that there are many ways we can connect elements to JavaScript space, and one of the common ways is by using IDs. Okay, so I'll create an ID here for increase, and I can say this is the increase, so that whenever, sorry, this is the decrease, so that whenever I click on the decrease button, I'll target it by using its ID. So I'll do a similar thing to the increase button. I'll give it ID increase, and then this 0 is the initial value of our counter. So I'll say it has ID counter. Okay, so now we'll use these IDs to target the elements from JavaScript. So let's define those three elements, the increase, the decrease, and the counter. So we can say const increase. So we're going to have a document DOM, and then we're going to target it by ID. Then the ID for increase, we saw it was also increase. And then we have the value of variable for decrease, document dot get element by D, and then decrease. I'm going to have our counter, going to have document dot get element by D, then its ID we gave it as counter, semicolon, 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 because you can see here we have a counter ID, we have decrease ID and increase ID. Okay, so now that we have initialized variables for the increase, decrease, and counter, so let's have our initial value for the counter. Before we do anything, I want to have our count variable, so initialize it to 0, and then we're going to make it happen in a way that if I click increase, I want to increase count from 0 all the way to 1. Okay, so we're going to use the increase button. So how do we get the increase button in JavaScript? By using the variable that we already created it, which is targeting an element with ID increase. So I'll use this and say increase. In fact, to make it unique, I'll introduce btn here. So it's increase btn and then decrease btn to make it unique and understood. So let's have our increase btn. So our increase btn is targeted by the ID increase because that's what we have here. ID increase targets that button. So our increase btn, going to give it an event listener, add event listener, and then the first parameter is for the event. So our event this time is a click event. I'm going to assign it an anonymous function. So when we click on it, we'll call a function that does an increase in the count value. So going to increase it this way. So if it was 0, we click on the increase button, it's gonna increase to 1 because of the count plus plus. So if it increases to 1, we want it read out in this counter span here. So once it has increased by 1, so going to have our counter, which was 0, update its text content to the value of the count that is currently in place. So if I come and click increase, and I have increased it by 1, how did that happen? So if I click on the button which is increase btn, I'm going to initiate an event listener by the click event, then going to increase whatever that is initially here. If it is 2, going to increase it by 1, so it's now 3. And then it's going to be updated inside the counter here. So the counter was 0, but now the JavaScript has made it to be 3 because you've clicked the button thrice. So if we decrease, right now it's not doing anything, but it's going to work simply because we want to add another function now that does the opposite of increase. So instead of increasing, now we'll decrease counter. So it's very simple on how we can make it decrease. So going to target the decrease btn, add an event listener to it, and the event that we are interested in is the click event. Add our anonymous function there, and then now when we click on the decrease button, I want to have a count decreased there. Then after that, we want to have our counter having its text content taking the new value of count in that scenario. Okay, so now when we increase this, it's going to increase, and then we click decrease, it's going to decrease. So that's how we use JavaScript to target elements in a page, and by simply having a simple counter, we are able to increase values by 1 and decrease them by 1. So you can do the same thing when you want to increase them by 2 or by 10 by changing this value of count plus plus here. Okay, so for instance, I can say counter plus equals to 5. Okay, so when I click increase, I'm going to increase them by 5s. Okay, so I'll do the same thing here. Count minus equals to 5. So when I increase it, it's going to increase by 5. When I decrease it, it's going to decrease by 5. So you can make it dynamic as possible. So you can increase by 10 but decrease by 5. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then when decreasing, it's going to use 5s. 45, 40, 35, 25, increase it to 35. So you can play around with this decrease and increment values to make it happen. So that's how we use a simple counter. I hope you got some value from the video. In the next video, we're going to see another scenario, how we're going to make use of a DOM knowledge, that is JavaScript, and a page, or increasing interactivity of a page in JavaScript. So see you in the next video. Bye bye.